The road to Windmere Hollow twisted like a serpent through the moors, swallowed by the rolling fog and the silence of untouched land. Bernita Hastings stared out of the coach window, watching the landscape grow darker and wilder with each passing mile. Her gloved hands clutched the small leather suitcase resting on her lap. Inside were only the essentials: clothes, a worn journal, and the old brass key that had arrived 2 weeks prior with a letter penned in an elegant, unfamiliar hand. "You have inherited the Hollow End cottage," it had said. "It is yours now, and it is time." Bernita knew little of the woman who had left it to her. Great-aunt Isadora Hastings had been a myth whispered by her parents, a reclusive figure who had vanished into the countryside decades ago. No photos. No visits. Only that name, Isadora, and a sense that she was never to be mentioned openly. The coach stopped with a hiss of steam outside the village's worn stone boundary. The driver, an older man with eyes like grey river stones, helped her down but said nothing. He simply tipped his cap, turned, and drove away, leaving her alone beneath the crumbling arch that welcomed no one. Windmere Hollow felt untouched by time. Gas lamps flickered dimly in the mist. Stone cottages leaned together like conspirators. Shops were shuttered, their windows fogged from within. The only sign of life came from the church bell tolling once in the distance, low and mournful. She walked the narrow path to Hollow End Cottage, guided only by the sound of her boots on wet cobblestone. The iron gate was rusted shut, but the key slid in with surprising ease. A groan of metal. The gate opened. Beyond it stood the cottage, a crooked, looming thing of timber and stone, smothered in ivy and shadow. Its windows were dark, its chimneys long cold. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and something older. Dust swirled in the lamplight as she stepped into the parlor. The wallpaper peeled in places. Old paintings lined the hallway, their subjects staring down with hollow eyes. A grandfather clock stood at the foot of the stairs, its ticking slow and uneven, as if struggling to keep pace with time itself. She explored room by room. The kitchen was still stocked with ancient tins. The drawing room bore a faded tapestry depicting a stag in a forest, threadbare from time. Upstairs, the bedrooms were silent, beds still made, a faint scent of lavender lingering in one. And then, the master bedroom. Isadora's room. The door creaked open to reveal a space untouched. A porcelain brush still rested on the vanity. The wardrobe stood ajar, revealing a glimpse of dark velvet. On the bedside table sat a single candle, already half burned, as if waiting to be lit once more. That night, the wind came. It whispered through the cracks in the windows, carried with it voices Bernita could not understand. She wrapped herself tighter beneath the heavy quilt, trying to convince herself it was nothing more than the Moor's way of speaking. But then it said her name. Bernita. So soft. So close. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. And then she heard it again. This time, from the floor below. Bernita. The whisper drifted into silence, swallowed by the weight of the old house. Bernita remained still beneath the quilt, her eyes wide open, heart pounding like the ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs. She told herself it must have been the wind. Yes, the wind often carried tricks. But deep within, something colder stirred. A knowing. A memory not her own. When morning broke, it brought no warmth. Grey light spilled through the curtains, painting everything in ash. Bernita wrapped her shawl tight and stepped into the hallway. The floorboards creaked beneath her with every step, as though the cottage groaned in protest. Downstairs, nothing appeared disturbed. The candle on the table still sat half-melted. The clock continued its slow, tired tick. But there was a smell, faint, metallic, almost like earth turned after rain. She followed it, nose wrinkled, through the parlor and into the study. It was the only room she hadn't dared open the night before. The door was heavier than the rest, its brass handle cold to the touch. She turned it slowly. The hinges wailed like something in pain. Inside, dust blanketed every surface. Tall bookshelves lined the walls, filled with cracked spines and strange titles. A desk stood at the center, ancient and carved with symbols she didn't recognize. But what caught her eye was the floor. A square outline in the wooden boards. Faint, almost invisible, but definitely there. A trapdoor. She knelt beside it, brushing away the dust. Her fingers found the small iron ring. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she pulled. The trapdoor lifted with a sigh of air, as though exhaling something long buried. Darkness yawned beneath. A wooden ladder led into shadow. The scent grew stronger, damp earth and something else she couldn't place. She lit the lantern she'd found in the kitchen earlier. Its glow was soft, golden, trembling. Holding it before her, she descended. The cellar below was narrow, the walls made of ancient stone. Shelves lined the space, filled with glass jars and yellowing paper. Old herbs hung from the ceiling in brittle bunches. And in the center, a circle. Carved into the stone. Etched with precision. Candles placed carefully at the points of a five-sided star. She stepped back instinctively. Then she saw it, beneath the dust, at the edge of the circle, a photograph. She picked it up with shaking fingers. It was a portrait. A woman with piercing eyes and dark hair coiled into a tight bun. Her mouth unsmiling. Her presence heavy even in stillness. On the back, scrawled in ink. Isadora Hastings. Windmere Hollow. 1894. Suddenly, the lantern flickered. A breath of cold air passed her cheek, though the cellar was sealed tight. Then she heard it again. Not a whisper this time. A creak. From above. As if someone, something, was walking across the floor of the study. She clutched the photo to her chest. Her voice caught in her throat. And then, thump. Another footstep. She wasn't alone. Bernita stood frozen at the bottom of the cellar steps. The lantern trembled in her hand, casting long shadows that danced along the stone walls. Another thump echoed from above, heavier this time. Deliberate. She pressed herself against the cold wall, straining to hear. Silence. But it was the kind of silence that listened back. She took one step up the ladder. Then another. Her breath shallow, the wooden rungs creaking beneath her. When she reached the top, she paused, ears ringing. The door was still open, the study empty. She stepped out slowly, lantern held high. Nothing. But something had changed. The smell of damp earth had vanished, replaced by the faint scent of lavender and something older, like paper, aged and yellow. She turned toward the mirror above the fireplace. A tall, oval glass framed in ornate brass. It had been covered in dust before. Now it was clean. Her reflection stared back at her, but not quite right. The room behind her appeared darker. Her face a little too still. And just over her shoulder, in the mirror only, a figure stood. A woman. Tall. Pale. Hair dark as ink and gathered into a severe twist. Her hands folded before her, unmoving. Her eyes locked onto Bernita's. Bernita spun around. The room was empty. She turned back to the mirror. The woman was still there. Bernita stumbled backward, the lantern swinging wildly. Shadows leapt across the walls. The mirror fogged at the edges as though someone were breathing on it from within. The woman's lips began to move. Slowly. Silently. Bernita watched, frozen. Then the message appeared, written not in chalk or blood, but in the breath that clung to the glass, forming words as clear as frost on a windowpane. Do not wake what sleeps. The light flickered once. And the mirror cracked. A single, jagged line running from top to bottom, splitting the reflection in two. Bernita dropped the lantern. It struck the floor with a clatter but miraculously did not shatter. She fled the room, her breath coming in gasps, the photo of Isadora Hastings still clutched in her fist. Upstairs, she shut the bedroom door and leaned against it, heart thudding in her ears. What was that? A spirit? A warning? A memory lingering like smoke? She opened the photo again. The eyes of the woman stared back at her. Cold. Watchful. Something stirred in the hallway. A voice, faint and childlike, called her name. Bernita. She stepped back, staring at the door. The handle twitched. No wind. No tricks. Someone, or something, was out there. And it knew her name. Morning light struggled through the thick clouds as Bernita sat in the cold kitchen, nursing a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. Her eyes were fixed on the grain of the table, mind replaying the events of the night like a broken reel of film. The voice. The mirror. The warning. She hadn't slept. Not a wink. Every creak of the house had kept her alert. She'd locked her bedroom door and pushed the chest of drawers against it, but it hadn't made her feel any safer. Not with the memory of that cracked mirror still sharp in her mind. As the clock in the hallway struck 8, she finally rose, clutching the photo of Isadora Hastings like a lifeline. The woman in the mirror wasn't just a ghost, she had a message. A warning. And Bernita needed to understand it. She returned to the study, the morning light revealing more than the lantern had. Books lined the shelves in uneven rows. Old ones, with cracked spines and faded titles. She ran her fingers across them, stopping at one that seemed newer than the rest, an unlabeled black journal. She opened it. Inside were entries written in neat cursive. Not recent, yellowing pages told that much, but clear enough to read. November 3rd. The child screams in her sleep again. I hear her even now, though she lies buried 2 floors down. They say grief makes you hear things. But I know what I know. Bernita frowned. November 7th. The dreams come more often. A woman stands at the foot of my bed. Hair like coal. Eyes like glass. She says nothing. Just watches. I think she is trying to speak through the girl. The pages trembled slightly in her hand. She turned to another entry. November 13th. I sealed the cellar. It's not enough. The house breathes when no one moves. The shadows remember. If I had known what would wake, I never would have read the names aloud. Names. Bernita turned the journal over, scanning the inside of the back cover. 3 names were written there. In red ink. She didn't recognize them. But as her finger traced the last name, she felt something shift. Not in the room. In the air. A pressure, as if the house itself were holding its breath. She dropped the journal. Suddenly, from the hallway, came a soft sound. Scrape, scrape, scrape. She turned. The sound grew louder. Closer. Like nails dragging across old wood. Bernita stepped into the hallway. Nothing there. Until she looked down. A trail of small, dusty footprints led from the front door to the base of the stairs. Child-sized. She followed them slowly, heart pounding louder with each step. The prints stopped at the bottom of the staircase. The air was thick. Still. As if the house was watching her. Then she saw it. A single, small handprint on the banister. Made of dust. And above it, carved into the wood, not scratched, but carved, were the same 3 names from the journal. The 3rd name began to bleed. Not ink. Real blood. And then she heard it again. Bernita. But this time, it was a whisper behind her ear. She spun around. No one. Only the sound of the ticking clock. And something moving upstairs. The staircase groaned beneath Bernita's feet as she slowly ascended, each step met with the rising hum of silence. It wasn't the comforting kind of silence, the kind that follows a rainstorm or rests gently over a sleeping village. This silence was heavy. Watchful. Like something unseen was listening too closely. At the top of the stairs, the air shifted. Colder. Thinner. A faint scent of old wood and something damp hung in the corridor. Bernita turned toward the far room. The door was slightly ajar, as if waiting. She pushed it open. It was a bedroom. Undisturbed. Dust blanketed everything, the bed, the dresser, the chair by the window, as though no one had stepped inside for decades. The curtains hung limp, stained with time. But on the wall opposite the bed, something caught her eye. A crack. Not just in the plaster, but in the very shape of the wall. A faint outline, too precise to be random, like the edge of a hidden panel. Bernita moved closer. Her breath fogged in the cold air. She reached out and traced the edge with her fingers. The panel creaked, resisting, then gave way with a groan, revealing a narrow door. Behind it, darkness. A staircase led down into the unknown, stone steps slick with damp and worn smooth with age. A single iron lantern hung from a rusted hook, as if someone had once made this journey and never returned. She lit a match. The flame trembled, revealing the top of the staircase. The darkness below felt alive, thick with secrets that had waited far too long to be remembered. With a deep breath, Bernita stepped inside and descended. The air grew colder with each step. The silence here was absolute. No creak. No wind. No sound from above. Only the slow echo of her breath and the distant, dripping rhythm of water somewhere deep below. The stairs ended in a narrow corridor carved from stone, walls slick with moisture. Moss clung to the edges like veins. On one side, old markings, symbols, had been scratched into the stone. Faint, but deliberate. Then came the door. Wooden. Heavy. Bound in iron. It looked ancient, but its hinges were clean, as though someone had opened it recently. Bernita reached for the handle. It turned. The door swung open. Inside was a room lit by flickering candlelight. The flames danced though there was no breeze. At the center stood a wooden chair. And in it sat a doll. Not a child's toy. Its face was carved from porcelain, eyes wide open, lips stitched shut with black thread. Its dress was red, deep as dried blood. And around its neck hung a small brass locket. Bernita stepped closer. As she did, the flames of the candles surged higher, as though sensing her presence. She reached for the locket. The second her fingers brushed it, the doll's head snapped toward her. Its mouth began to tear at the stitches. Thread popped. One by one. Until it opened. And whispered. She's still here. Then the candles blew out. Darkness swallowed the room. Something breathed beside her. Close. Too close. The darkness was complete. Bernita stood frozen, her breath shallow, her pulse pounding against her ribs like a warning drum. Something moved in the blackness, slow, deliberate, circling her. She could hear it. Not footsteps, not the rustle of fabric, but a presence. Felt more than heard. She fumbled for her matches, her hands trembling as she struck one. A spark. A flicker. Then light. The doll was gone. The chair stood empty, the locket resting on its seat, swaying gently as if someone had just left it there. Bernita stepped back, heart racing. She turned. The door she'd come through was shut. She didn't remember closing it. With the match fading, she snatched the locket and dashed to the door. It opened with a reluctant groan, revealing the damp corridor once more. She climbed the stairs quickly, nearly stumbling in her haste to leave the cellar behind. Upstairs, the air was warmer. The silence less oppressive, but still charged with something unsaid. She took the locket to the sitting room and examined it by the window. It was old. Victorian, perhaps. The clasp resisted at first, then clicked open. Inside, a faded photograph. A woman. Pale, severe, her eyes sharp and oddly familiar. She wore a high-necked gown, and beside her stood a child, maybe 4 or 5 years old, whose face had been scratched out. Under the photograph, in delicate, looping script, a name had been etched. Elizabeth Redwine. Bernita felt a chill ripple through her. Redwine. The same surname as her grandmother's. A name buried in family records, barely spoken. Elizabeth Redwine had been whispered about in passing tones, said to be eccentric, possibly dangerous, someone better left forgotten. But Bernita remembered the old story now. A fire. A scandal. A missing girl. She turned the locket over. There, almost invisible against the tarnished brass, was another engraving. She sees all. A sudden gust of wind burst through the open window, scattering papers across the room. Bernita turned sharply. The portrait above the fireplace, an imposing oil painting she hadn't noticed before, was now uncovered. A woman stood at its center, regal and composed, wearing the same high-necked gown. Her eyes were dark. Deep. Piercing. It was Elizabeth. But more than that, her eyes seemed to follow Bernita. And now, the child beside her had no face at all. Just smooth canvas. Bernita backed away. Then she heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps on the upper floor. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. She raced into the hallway, eyes fixed on the stairwell. Shadows shifted at the top. A whisper drifted down. Come see me. Bernita clutched the locket tightly and began to climb. Each step creaked under her weight, but she didn't stop. Couldn't. At the top landing, she paused. The guest bedroom door was open. Inside, the curtains danced in the wind. On the bed, something waited. A painting. Still wet. Still fresh. She moved closer, her breath catching. It was her. Her own face. Painted in chilling detail. And behind her, a figure stood in shadow. A woman with sharp eyes and stitched lips. Before Bernita could react, the brush on the bedside table lifted. It hovered. Then began to move on its own. A line. A second line. A red mouth stitched shut. The brush paused. Then painted her name beneath the portrait. Bernita Redwine. The door slammed shut behind her. The door behind her locked itself with a heavy click. Bernita rushed toward it, yanking the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Her heart pounded in her throat. The air in the guest bedroom grew colder, thick with the scent of turpentine and old wood. The canvas behind her still glistened with wet paint, but no hand held the brush now resting motionless on the floor. Her name. Her face. That stitched mouth figure looming behind her. Bernita backed into the corner, trying to catch her breath, when a dull creaking echoed through the room. She turned. At the far end of the chamber, something shifted behind the wardrobe. It moved slowly, as though something, or someone, was trying to open it from the inside. The door cracked open just an inch. Then stopped. Bernita approached cautiously, her fingers brushing the edge of the heavy wood. With a trembling hand, she pulled it open. Nothing. Only darkness. Then, behind the coats, she saw it, another door, narrow and concealed. She hesitated. Then reached out and turned the handle. It opened onto a spiraling stairwell, narrow and cold. A gust of stale air escaped, smelling of mildew and forgotten time. Bernita took a candle from the dresser and lit it with the last of her matches, then stepped inside. The walls grew tighter as she descended, the air colder with each step. At the bottom, she emerged into a chamber lined entirely with mirrors. Dozens of them. Some cracked. Some fogged. Some still gleaming as if untouched by time. In the center stood a single chair, and on it, an open book. Bernita stepped forward. The mirrors didn't reflect her properly. In one, she appeared younger. In another, older. Her eyes hollow. Her mouth sewn shut. She reached for the book. Its pages were handwritten. Delicate. Ancient. Each one a journal entry, signed with the initials E.R. They spoke of visions. Of a house that breathed in secrets. Of a child taken and voices that never stopped whispering. On the last page, a line was freshly inked. She returns. The mirror remembers her. She cannot leave. The candle flickered violently. One by one, the mirrors began to cloud. A soft sound echoed around her. Laughter. A child's laughter. High. Distant. Getting closer. Bernita turned to leave, but the doorway was gone. Just solid stone. And the mirrors began to ripple like water. From the glass, shapes emerged. Pale hands. A stitched mouth. Black eyes, wide and watching. One mirror cracked. Then another. Then a hand reached through. Bernita stumbled back, clutching the book to her chest. The candle went out. In the dark, she felt something brush her cheek. Cold. Gentle. Then the whisper, right against her ear. Come and see what was hidden. Light flared, every mirror lit with fire from within. Each showed a different version of her, trapped, screaming, decaying. She screamed. And then, one mirror shattered, revealing a corridor behind it. She ran through without hesitation, into a long, crooked hallway lit by a single swaying bulb. At the end stood a door, red, weathered, and carved with the same strange symbol from the cellar floor. She reached it. But before she could turn the knob, a voice called out behind her. Soft. Mournful. Bernita. She turned slowly. At the far end of the hallway, in the flickering light, stood a woman in a Victorian gown. Elizabeth Redwine. Her lips unmoving. Her eyes endless. She raised her hand, pointing toward Bernita. Then whispered, without speaking. You belong here. The moment Elizabeth's form dissolved into shadow, the red door creaked open on its own. Bernita hesitated at the threshold. The room beyond pulsed with a deep red glow, like the heartbeat of the house itself. The air was thick and humming, heavy with a presence that watched without eyes. She stepped through. The room was circular, its walls covered in murals, paintings done in that same haunting style. They stretched from floor to ceiling, each one depicting a different version of the Redwine house. In one, it stood tall and new, bright under a summer sky. In another, it burned beneath a night of thunder and ash. At the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal, and upon it, a small cradle. Empty. Bernita approached, her breath catching. Inside the cradle, laid carefully, was a bundle of yellowing cloth. She peeled it back. A doll. Its mouth sewn shut with black thread. Its eyes glassy and lifeless. Around its neck hung a pendant. The same symbol she had seen carved into the cellar, the hallway door, and the mirrors. She touched it. The room went dark. A scream tore through the chamber, not Bernita's. A child's. Then another. Louder. Closer. Figures flickered in the shadows, women, countless women, all bearing the same face as Elizabeth Redwine. And in their arms, swaddled bundles. Some silent. Some crying. Some limp. They formed a circle around Bernita. And then she understood. The Redwine line. It wasn't a family. It was a ritual. A curse. A cycle. Elizabeth had been the first, her child taken. Her grief so deep it cracked the veil between this world and whatever lay beyond. In her agony, she made a pact. The house would offer a chance to reclaim what was lost. But only at a cost. A new soul for the house. A replacement. A mirror. Bernita's hands trembled as she held the doll. The whispers returned, swirling like wind around her. Give it a name. She looked down. The doll's mouth twitched. Give it your name. She stumbled back. No, she whispered, voice breaking. You won't take me. The mirrors on the wall began to shimmer again. Her face. Again and again. All staring. All afraid. All silent. Then, from the darkness, Elizabeth's voice, no longer mournful, but triumphant. You walked through every door. You followed every thread. You opened what was never meant to be opened. A sudden gust extinguished all light. In total blackness, Bernita clutched the doll, heart racing, surrounded by the soft hiss of unseen whispers. Then, a single light flickered on. It came from a small oil lamp, glowing dimly by a door that had not been there before. A normal door. No symbols. No darkness. Just aged oak and brass. She ran. The weight of the house tried to pull her back. The air grew thicker. Her limbs heavier. The whispers became wails. Hands reached from the walls, ghostly and cold, grazing her arms, her hair, her back. She threw the door open. Daylight. Actual daylight. Fields stretched out beyond. The red wine house far behind her, now smaller, older, its windows dark. She collapsed to her knees. Silence. But just before she could catch her breath, a soft sound made her freeze. The creak of a pram's wheel on wooden floorboards. She turned. The doll. It had followed her. Sitting upright in the grass. Its mouth still sewn shut. But its eyes. They blinked.